Hey, Mr. Simon here. So we got part two of the Create Performance task. And really, one of the best resources are the graded sample performance tasks at the College Board. I link to them on the website. If you go to apcsprinciples.github.io and scroll down to Create Performance task, you'll see this link. So let me show you what that looks like. How do we get out of here? Let's try that. That looks like it's going to work. So let's come over here. This is apcsprinciples.github.io. Scroll down and find the Create Performance task, and then click on Graded Sample Performance Tasks. Now you're going to have to scroll down. It's going to take you to this screen. Keep going, keep going, keep going. This is the good stuff right here. The scoring guidelines and notes for last year's 2019 exam. There are, I don't know how many of these are, A to J, create sample responses. So click on one. You can see what they wrote for their submission. You can also see their video. And so here you can see this is how they, what their game looked like. And you can see they're using Screencast-O-Matic just like I am. So that's worth checking out. I think it's a great resource. And then if you keep looking there, off to the side, so you've got all your written responses in your video, sample videos, but go over here. You want to go to the next part right here, the commentary and scoring distribution. Now, when you open that up, the first thing you're going to come across are the scoring guidelines. And this is the rules that they give the graders on whether or not to give you the 8 points. There's 8 rows, 1 point each, and you either get the point or you don't. So you can see the scoring criteria here. The other thing that's really helpful is if you keep scrolling down, you can see how each of these samples, A through J, was scored. And I think it's especially helpful to look at samples that got full credit, like A and B, where they got all 8 points. So you'll see the justification for why they got all 8 points, but then it's helpful too to look at the ones that didn't get all 8 points. So you'll want to look at all of those. Now, you should be working on your create task, and what you do is this kind of what they call the software development cycle. You start out with an idea, you design your program, you try and write it, you test it out, and well, it doesn't work. So you go back and you refine your idea, add or change the design to match the new idea, write the code, test it out. And usually it takes many, many, many iterations of this development cycle before you get to a point where you can say, I'm happy with my program. You're going to want to kind of keep this in the back of your head while you're working on the create task, because they're going to ask you about this. So let's say you have this idea. I'm going to make a game, and my game's going to do this, and you start writing code to make it work, and you run the program, and, well, it never works the first time. So, you're going to repeat this process over and over. Now, when you're working on this, your program can really be anything. It can be a game, a drawing, an animation, a simulation, a visualization, some useful tool that helps people out. Really, it could be anything. There's a template where you're going to write your answers to the prompts, and one of the things that you're going to start with is by writing the purpose of my program. And it's perfectly acceptable to put the prompt in your response and start writing a sentence like the purpose of my program is to, right, fill in the blank. You're not going to get any points for how your response is written. It's like you get the point if you address the question or not. So they're going to ask you to write about difficulties and opportunities as you're working on your create task. So you can describe two different points in that process. So you could describe, opportunity where you realized you could add something, or difficulty where you would have to change things. If you're going to have to make a change, we sometimes call that an incremental change, right? As we go through the software development cycle, we realize hey, our goal was way too hard. We're going to scale this back and we're going to have to change it and then re-implement it based on that change. An iterative change is when, as you're working on the code, you find chances to make the code better. You're not changing the design of the program. You're just making the code better organized, easier to reuse. So these iterative changes tend to be smaller. The incremental change is like where we go from version 1 to version 2, and there's a significant change in the design. So they're going to ask you about both of these in 2B. Now, you can answer this by talking about 2 opportunities you had to improve your program, 2 difficulties, or 1 opportunity and 1 difficulty. An opportunity means you're working on it, you realized, hey, I could add this extra feature, or I could make the code better. Difficulty would be like, I'm not going to be able to implement my original design. It's too difficult. It's going to mean too much coding, so I'm going to have to scale it back. Or, you ran into a problem with your program and you learned something like, oh, okay, that's how that's supposed to work. I didn't realize that was supposed to work that way. So difficulties often cause incremental changes where you have to go back and change your design because you just bit off more than you can chew. If that's the problem, you want to explain that it's incremental and that you had to change the design of your program. Often this is going to happen near the start of your programming process. You definitely want to talk in terms of what you are doing. All your work for the create task code has to be independent. So always use the words I or me. You don't want to say I got help from my teacher or I got help from my partner, because the code that you're writing about on the create task needs to be your own. If you're running into trouble at the beginning of your programming process, you're probably going to make an incremental change that changes the design of your program. For instance, you might decide it's too difficult to make a health bar for your game, so you eliminate that element of the design and you simplify the game. That's a great thing to write about. Don't worry that you're scaling back your expectations. That's a very common thing, and it's a good thing to write about. As you're working and it gets, later in the programming process, that's where you might make these iterative changes. An example would be that as you've been working on your program, you're writing the same kind of code over and over again, and you realize you could replace all that duplicate code by writing one function and then calling that function in multiple places in the code. That's a great opportunity for an abstraction to write about. We're going to be asked to do about that later. And it doesn't change the design of your program. It doesn't change how it works. So it's an iterative change. It's just an opportunity where you make the program run better or make it better organized. So you could explain that this repeated code could be eliminated to make your code easier to read, easier to understand, and easier to modify. And that's it. So we're going to stop there. If you got any questions, let me know, and I will have another video for part 3 of the create task soon.